If you live in Portland, you have a chance to change the city's future.
Kind of like our gift to the city.
Many of you agree on one thing.
Portland's government needs to change.
But not everyone agrees on exactly how to change it.
It's not fair to the voters. This is a very complex issue to have all of these wrapped together.
On your ballot now, the option to overhaul City Hall and install a brand new system. On both sides, people are fired up, and Hollywood A-listers have even weighed in.
This measure is designed to get Portland's government working for the people again.
Part of the proposed change introduces a new way to vote. In fact, that new way to vote is on the ballot in Portland, Multnomah County, and Clark County. Here's the story.
I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We're starting tonight with a form of voting that's gaining traction around the country. It's called ranked choice voting. It can be confusing because it can be done differently depending on where you are. Even here in Oregon, what's being done now in Corvallis is different than what's being proposed for the big charter reform here in Portland. So let's dig into what it is and why it's growing in popularity. Most American elections use what's called a plurality system. Voters choose one candidate. Whoever gets the highest percentage of the vote wins, even if they don't get a majority. But more cities and states are joining places like Portland, Maine, which began using ranked choice voting to pick its mayor back in 2011. More about Maine in a moment. But first, an explanation of ranked choice voting from the group Fair Vote, which is promoting the idea.
Ranked choice voting is another voting method which allows voters to rank their candidates in order of preference. In a ranked choice voting election, a candidate needs to earn more than half of the votes to win. All first choices are counted, and if a candidate has a majority, then they win, just like any other election. If not, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated, and voters who picked that candidate as number one will have their votes count for their next choice. This process continues until a candidate earns a majority and is declared the winner.
Okay, so that's how it works. And remember how Portland, Maine is using ranked choice voting? Well, before the 2019 election, NBC talked with the city's mayor, Ethan Strimling, about how that changes the way he and others campaign.
Somebody could easily win this race if there weren't ranked choice voting with 36% of the vote. So that would mean that I could almost ignore the other 65% of the people out there. But because there's ranked choice voting, I can't ignore them. I have to talk to them as well because I need them to rank me second. And I find that once you have those conversations, you can begin to soften some of that gap.
Well, not enough ranked him second. He ended up losing that election in 2019, but he makes a good point. And ranked choice voting continues to spread across the country. A national group pushing the change, again called Fair Vote, they report that 53 cities, 2 states, and 1 county are now all using that system. And several in the Northwest are deciding whether to adopt it, including Seattle, Clark County, and San Juan County in Washington state, along with Portland and Multnomah County here in Oregon. Fair Vote reports the idea is catching fire.
Ranked choice voting is the fastest growing nonpartisan election reform in the country right now because it is improving elections.
Now, we're not here to say that you should vote for or against ranked choice voting, but you should understand it. It's an idea getting a lot of interest. Here in Oregon, Benton County has been working on implementing ranked choice voting for several years now. Voters first approved moving over to ranked choice voting back in 2016. It was approved by a pretty big margin, and it's been working out so well that this year Corvallis decided to use it to elect their new mayor.
Back in 2016, Benton County voters voted to adopt the voting method for certain races on the county level. That ballot measure was successful, and in 2020, Benton County used ranked choice voting for the first time for a commissioner's race. That was successful, and there was also interest on the city level. So earlier this year, in January 2022, our city council voted to adopt ranked choice voting for certain races with candidates with more than 3 candidates.
Corvallis is using that system we talked about earlier. 3 people are running for mayor. If one candidate gets more than 50% of the vote, they're going to win. But if they all get less than 50%, the person who got the lowest number of first choice votes is eliminated. And if you picked that person, then your first place, your votes then go to your second choice pick. If there are more than 3 candidates, the process repeats until someone has 50% of the vote. In Portland, well, that's a bit more tricky. If the charter reform proposal is approved, Portland would switch indeed to ranked choice voting, but, and this is a big difference, the city council people would vote for 3 people per district. And you'd vote for all 3 at once. So you see, that's kind of a little sticky there. It's a problem for some people opposing the measure, like Portland activist Kathleen Sadat, who worries that the winners would not have broad enough support.
It still does not say to me that there's a safe place for someone who's elected to be considered viable at 25% of the vote. At 25% of the vote, we run the risk of having someone who is, I won't call them fringe, I'll call them antagonistic to the way Portland has done things, and to cause more confusion. And if they can stay in with 25% of the vote, it's hard to get them out, especially if they're organized and their constituency is organized.
Okay, so what she's talking about is unlike when you're just voting for like 3 people but only 1 winner where they get 50% and they win. Here, when you're voting for 3 at the same time, they don't need 50%. They could win with as much as 25% or 27%. And that's kind of the concern we're starting to hear from folks. We heard that concern from a lot of people, in fact, including our late political analyst, Len Bergstein. But a WSU professor in Vancouver who supports the Portland charter change, Mark Steffen, says that 25% number really not as bad as it sounds.
The focus on the 25% ends up being a bit confusing. The fact is that we as voters in a multi-winner district are going to see 3 people elected to the council. And so we're just ranking our choices, but honestly, potentially our first and our second and third choice could all be chosen. And if, let's say, our first choice wasn't even in the race, well, our second and third would have been chosen. The notion of the 25% is about how everyone, all the voters, get at least some shot at having their first choice be elected. And if not their first choice, maybe at least their second choice. Again, it's the same kind of idea that I just laid out. And so really, we really are picking 3 candidates. We just happen to rank them because we're trying to allow everyone's preferences to be acknowledged in that. So it's not really about the 25%. It's actually broader support that you'll see for candidates, for the 3 that win in that particular district.
The professor says ranked choice voting is actually a better way to elect candidates because even if you don't get your first choice, you might get someone you're okay with rather than someone that you actually hate.
Usually, most voters are going to get their first or second choice, and they're still going to maybe get someone they're not as satisfied with, but it's not a simple like, okay, who's less worse than the other. Less of that is going on. It's much more about who I really like and who can I accept.
And you probably tell he thinks it's a great idea and he's promoting it. All right, let's get back to the big picture now. Ranked choice voting is a system that is being used in more and more cities around the U.S. and in more countries around the world. We hear from you a lot when you say you're sick of choosing between what seems like the lesser of 2 evils, and also that you're sick of political attack ads. And as we heard from that former mayor of Portland, Maine, and now from Professor Steffen, ranked choice voting can soften that up to a degree.
It's something that is gaining sort of enthusiasm around the country. There's now talk about thinking about governor's races and congressional races in the same sort of way, because there's a lot of benefits that come with these that are separate just from just the ranking. It's also about how the candidates learn to interact with each other, because with ranked choice voting, you're not wanting to necessarily be first for everyone. You're wanting to be first or second for everyone. And so that means you don't necessarily attack one of the other, the other candidates. You maybe don't attack any of them. You want to be cordial to them. And so all of the negativity that we see in elections right now, especially now in the national elections, that stuff kind of washes away, not completely, but it somewhat washes away when candidates are being ranked versus pick my side or the other side.
Not everybody thinks it's a great idea, though. Over the summer, we talked with skeptics who think the entire Portland charter reform is just way too complicated.
I don't think we should go as we've said repeatedly, from a government that no one is using to a government that has never been used.
Your new government system is a very distinct issue from how you vote. I understand the commission wants to put these together, but it's not fair to the voters.
By the way, both Clark County and Multnomah County voters will be asked whether to approve the simple version of ranked choice voting, not the complicated version that Portland's looking at. So, what about you? What do you think of ranked choice voting? Share your thoughts with me. Send me an email. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave us a voice message. Our number is 503-226-5090. Coming up next on The Story, we're delving into Portland's homeless crisis, where people living on the streets tell us there's a major barrier that stops them from getting a job and a roof over their head. And it has to do with the criminal justice system. How advocates are working to make improvements when The Story returns. Now to our homeless crisis. Tonight we're focusing in on homeless people with criminal backgrounds, criminal records, namely felonies. They tell us having a criminal background creates challenges to getting off the streets and into housing. Some say it's one of the main barriers. Blair Best reports it's an issue rooted in the criminal justice system, and it's one that advocates are hoping to change.
You can't dismiss bad decisions.
Survival.
I thought I was going to prison for sure this time.
Oftentimes a full-time job when living on the streets.
I got my wife here in the tent, and
but doing it without the hope of ever finding work and leaving.
It's a cycle. It's a downward spiral.
Makes it a whole lot worse.
It's because I have such an extensive criminal record, it's almost impossible for me to get a job.
This is Matt. He lives in a tent on the side of Southeast Powell Boulevard. He's faced 11 felony charges for manufacturing, distribution, and possession of marijuana and cocaine.
The most recent arrest I had was actually not that long ago.
The first two charges were filed in 1998, 4 more in 2001, and 5 in 2017.
Honestly, I don't. It's been so long. I've had those felonies on my record for so long that I don't even really think about it anymore.
If we want our communities to be safe and for people to live safe, stable lives, they have to have a second chance.
A second chance for people like Matt is what Shannon White is fighting for at the Partnership for Safety and Justice. That's a nonprofit advocating for solutions to crime that don't involve incarceration.
If we're holding people accountable, do we need to saddle them with a lifelong felony conviction?
There are people out there that, look at these people with criminal backgrounds and, they say, oh, well, if they get pardoned, they're just going to repeat and they're going to do it again. There's going to be no incentive for them to change their habits and their ways.
If people cause harm in the community, there needs to be accountability for it. And I don't think anyone would say that shouldn't happen. But if it's something like an addiction-driven crime, if someone's, using or doing other things related to their drug use, the thing that's going to help them not commit those crimes is not incarceration, right? It's actually getting the support they need to be successful.
We actually are trying to focus on a population that is really just trying to literally survive on the streets.
For the past 9 months, Drew Grabham at Central City Concern has been leading a team of 7 to find and meet with about 200 homeless people a week.
They just make us feel like part of the human race again, you know what I mean, and not like the dregs of society.
They help people like Matt chart a path to getting off the streets. A common barrier for many is repeat felony charges. The consequences range from prison to jail sentences, fines, potentially losing the right to vote, and being denied professional licenses, which can prevent people from qualifying for housing or employment.
It can be hugely prohibitive of what it can really shrink what their opportunities are.
In a job pool that already feels unattainable to many.
Because it's almost pointless.
Even for people like Amanda Drennan, who dreams of one day getting out.
I'm pretty much ready to go. I got my wagon with my food and stuff. It's just getting it from, here to wherever I'm going. I would like to get a job. I would like to see myself moving forward. I would really like to see myself out of a tent.
She's been homeless for 2 months and has tried finding work.
A secretary job I've tried, and I've tried to do home-based jobs too even, and that's not working out because I don't have a lot of experience.
Lack of experience is one thing.
Like you don't have your clothes washed, you don't have an alarm clock. 90% of the time, if I have a phone, it's dead.
Like, look at me. I don't look hyper employable. When I smell like shit for, like maybe about half the month, hard to get a shower. I got to ride a bike to wherever I'm going to get a job, which by the way got stolen last night. You see a theme going on here in Portland.
A theme leaving many hopeless.
Portland has good people in it, and it could be a nice place, but it's just, for whatever reason, is a place to be right now.
As for those outreach teams that work with the homeless, well, they need a lot more funding and staffing in order to keep up with the increased number of people living on our streets. According to the most recent point-in-time count, there are more than 5,000 homeless people in Multnomah County. As for how many of them have felonies, well, that's still unclear, since Portland police don't keep track of that, given people's housing status can change on a dime. Blair Best, KTW News.
And I asked Blair to pull back the curtain on her reporting for this story. It was so good. To let us know how she came up with the idea, here's what she sent us back.
Hey Pat, joining you from downtown Portland. Wanted to share some insight on my reporting of this story. When I talk with homeless people, I often ask them 2 questions. 1, how did they become homeless? And 2, what's getting in the way of getting them off the streets? And the most common response I hear to the second one is criminal records, specifically felonies. It stops them from getting jobs, stops them from getting housing. quick anecdote. When I was at this large homeless camp in Longview, Washington, several months ago, I talked with this group of men, all under the age of 25. All of them had felonies on their record. And they told me they don't want to be in this camp. They would love to have a job, but they can't because of their criminal record. And one man said to me, the world isn't felony friendly. And that line really stuck out to me for the past several months and ultimately, led me to do this story. So anyways, I wanted to look further into that. So we went to Southeast Powell Boulevard to talk with some people along those large camps there. And what we found was that the nonprofits doing outreach with these homeless people, they say navigating the job market and the housing market with felonies on your record is incredibly difficult. And you add homelessness on top of that, forget it.
That's what the good reporters do, folks. They dig in, they listen, they follow up. Still to come on the story. We are 1 week away from Election Day, and thousands of you have already mailed or dropped off your ballot. We're taking a look at which communities in Oregon and Washington get those ballots in earliest and which wait until the very last minute. That's coming up after the break. We are exactly 1 week away from Election Day. Can you feel the anticipation building? I can. Or maybe it's just the anticipation of the political ads finally ending for you. Either way, we're in the home stretch. So let's check back in on the ballot returns so far in both Oregon and Washington. Let's start in the Beaver State with nearly 3 million registered voters. More than 570,000 of you have already voted and mailed or dropped off your ballot. That's just over 19%. So nearly 1 in 5 voters here in Oregon have made up their minds and you've finished your ballots. Congratulations. Now let's take a look at the highest performing counties in Oregon based solely on the percentage of ballots returned. At the top of the list, congratulations, Lake County. More than 1 in 3 voters have turned in the ballots there. Next is Wheeler County, just over 31%. Third is Grant County with just over 30%. Well done, counties. How about the bottom 3 Oregon counties with the lowest percentage of ballots returned? Third is Polk County at 13.6%. Next is Columbia County at 12.8%. Coming in last place, exactly 1 week from Election Day, Yamhill County at less than 11%. By the way, for those of you wondering, Multnomah County is near the bottom of the list with 15.5% of the ballots turned in so far. But remember this, Multnomah County has the largest number of eligible voters by far. So it's not that surprising to see them near the bottom. All right, let's check in on Washington state's numbers. Nearly 4.8 million registered voters there. More than 870,000 have returned a ballot. That makes up just over 18%. Much like we saw yesterday, Washington is just a tad behind Oregon, but Washington also has 1.8 million more voters. How about the top performing Washington counties, where folks are already turning in those votes ASAP? Jefferson County tops the list for the second day in a row. Congratulations, Jefferson County. 1 in 3 ballots returned there. Lincoln County moves up a spot to second at 32%, and Columbia County is third at 31.2%. And here are the bottom 3 counties. Okanogan stays third to last at 13.8%. Stevens is not far behind, 13.4%, and Grant County is last with just 8.5% of the ballots turned in. For our friends in Clark County, by the way, you're not too far from the bottom of the list, just 16.5% of your ballots returned. By the way, we hope you appreciate us taking time to look at these ballot return numbers each day. We're going to do it until the election, and we're doing it to give us all a sense of how many people are taking part in this ritual of democracy. All right, keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. We're going to wrap things up right after this. For our Hey Help profile this week, we're talking about the KGW Great Toy Drive. Last year, with your help, we donated over 30,000 toys to local kids. This year, we're raising the bar. Head to kgw.com/toy to sign up. We'll send a collection kit your way, and you can help collect toys for local families. And a special shout out tonight to Five Sisters Flower Company at Washington Square for signing up. Well done. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching and being here with me. Remember, the story, our story, Well, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.